Toast Bites.
Chomp.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Toast Bites, where we take a look at some fantastic indie games I played that didn't get a standalone video on my channel. A link to each game is in the description, along with a hidden gem, and you can check out more episodes of Toast Bites by clicking the card icon or watching the playlist at the end of this video. Let's get into it!
Number 1.
Encodya is a point-and-click adventure game set in an ever-popular dystopian cyberpunk world. You play as both Tina, a 9-year-old orphan, and her robot Sam 53, exploring the corporation-controlled megalopolis of Neo-Berlin. It has all the tonal qualities you'd expect from that setting. This shadow of Blade Runner-esque oppression cast by fading neon lights flickering in the rain, but the story itself isn't dark and brooding. The gameplay is pretty standard fare, with you searching for items and figuring out ways to use them by dragging them onto objects in the environment or combining them. And you can interact with everything as both characters, who can be swapped out on the fly, but the outcome depends on which character you are. Some NPCs respond better to one than the other, and there are some actions only one or the other can complete, which would be more frustrating if it wasn't at least given a believable in-universe excuse. Both have their own inventory as well, able to give items to one another at any time, either to solve a puzzle or just to use. And one concern I have about the ability to pass items back and forth is that it makes it harder to know which character needs to use them, assuming it matters, or which items need to be combined, though there were some items they couldn't share. You can also give items to NPCs, which in the demo was a bit inconsistent. In one case I had to speak to them about the item to give it to them, while in other cases I could just drag the item onto them. Regardless, the puzzles and their solutions made sense in the context of the story, and the dialogue kept things interesting enough not to feel like a string of fetch quests. All of the lines are voiced, and there's quite a bit of meta humor for those of you who enjoy that. I found it a bit heavy-handed in the demo, but it may be better spaced out in the full game. As for the art style, it's a bit hard to pin down, at times reminding me of Borderlands where the character designs are concerned, but the game certainly stands out for it, and it was honestly why I played it. And the demo only featured a handful of areas to get you started, but the full game will have over 50 locations and more than 30 NPCs to interact with, so I can see the story taking interesting turns. Encodya is slated for release sometime in the near future, and with an estimate of 6 hours plus worth of gameplay, it's worth keeping on your radar if you'd like a more visually modernized take on PAX, which again, for anyone new to my channel, stands for point and clicks. You can download the demo of Encodya right now on itch.
Number 2.
Scrap Story is an adorable paper RPG where you run, jump, fight, float, and collect your way through a bright paper world, giving you that nostalgic Paper Mario realness. The demo I played featured some of the platforming elements, but the developer has another demo on the way that'll showcase more of the game's mechanics and story in full. Now the highlight here is obviously the art style. We've seen these paper games before, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Scrap Story's design is so pretty from head to toe, with lovely attention to detail in the environment and animation that adds to its charm, like the wind bending your character as she runs or whenever she's idle. I was happy to see some customization too. You can equip different weapons, items, and outfits, which affect her stats, and unlock new abilities, like turning into a paper plane to reach new areas, or bashing through obstacles with a hammer to open new paths. There are also NPCs to trade with, chat with, and I'm assuming enemies, since one of the items you start with is a sword. I really enjoyed looking for hidden areas and testing out what I could interact with, whether it was chopping down flowers or shaking trees. Where things got iffy for me was when it came to the platforming. There were areas placed in the environment in ways that seemed like I could reach them with bouncy pads or spins, but the height, length, and direction of my jumps when using those boosts weren't consistent. It took so much effort to get to certain areas that I wasn't sure if it was designed to be reached that way, or if I had just cheesed it. I can't say how much it will affect the overall gameplay until there's more of it, so for now, just take it as a heads up that there may be spots where you get stuck. I should also note that it's optimized for an Xbox controller, which I used, though keyboard controls are supported. And there's no release date for Scrap Story yet, and the developer hasn't really given that many details, but it's their first game, so they can use all the feedback and support they can get. So show the devs some love and check out the demo on itch.
Number 3.
We Are the Plague is a single-player story-driven tactical turn-based game set in a hand-drawn dark fantasy world. I mostly quoted the dev there since that's exactly what this is. You play as someone seemingly resurrected who aligns himself with a force called the Plague and sets out on a journey of destruction and revenge. I'll say right out of the gate that I've grown less tolerant of turn-based games to the point where I mostly don't play them, so the fact that this one kept me playing at all is a testament to it having that certain something. The mechanics are pretty basic. You click to move through the environment on a grid, and you can interact with NPCs and objects or battle enemies adjacent to you. You can customize your character and weapons with different runes and tattoos that, as far as I can tell, you just rip off other people's skin and slap onto your chest. You can also have party members, NPCs you meet out in the world who, as downtrodden and waffling in pain's endless void as you are, choose to accompany you and fight or die alongside you. I don't know from what I read or played if you can revive dead party members, but it was a nice touch having the horror-stricken skull of my fallen friend replace his mugshot, and I didn't see mention of how many party members you can have, but given that most enemy encounters are either random or unavoidable, you'll want to recruit as many unfortunate souls as you can. Again, there isn't anything to write home about as far as how you play the game. You click, you move, you fight, and you try to do it all strategically. The intention here does seem to be a healthy amount of difficulty, though I wouldn't call the game hard. You just can't mindlessly breeze through it. The combat is also straightforward. Different characters have different attacks based on their weapon or where they are on the grid relative to enemies, so consideration needs to be given to where and when you move them. I'm not sure how I feel about the way the combat is animated, but the music needs to be tweaked to fade back into the ambient sounds of the area you're in after the fight is over, because right now the transition is very abrupt, which is jarring and makes the combat seem unpolished. I'd also like the map to be scrollable whenever you can travel farther on the grid than is currently visible, so you don't have to waste time moving in smaller increments. Regardless, the real star of the show here is the world building and the aesthetic. The artwork is gorgeous, and the dialogue has a haunting quality that paints a vivid picture of the bleak road you're traveling. The dev tried to add a bit of humor to your plague companion's personality, which seems to be par for the course in games where there's a devil on your shoulder, so to speak. But the atmosphere in general is great, thanks to the sound design and even the subtle weather effects. I also have to mention that the song from the main menu, the one you're hearing right now, was so good I listened to it twice before starting the game, so I expect the music composition to be brilliant. Overall, We Are the Plague is a great choice for lovers of turn-based games that invest a little extra time in their lore, or folks who just want to play around in a spiritually oppressive setting. The full game is slated for release later this year, but you can download the demo right now on Steam.
Number 4.
The Unexpected Quest is a story-based strategic management game where you play as a community of dwarves out on an adventure, collecting, building, and battling as you go. There's a number of lovely locations from tiny villages to snowy mountaintops, and each one is laid out in a way that provides an increasing amount of freedom in how you approach it. Each chapter does have an end goal, but it's entirely up to you how you get there, and all of your choices add something to the gameplay. It isn't all about gathering resources either. There are optional quests you can complete too, and I love that everything ties into the story. There's a lot to do, and each chapter builds upon the last, adding new characters, new structures, and new items to equip that grant various boons. Some items have negative effects you have to balance depending on your needs. Some effects are passive, some are timed, and there's a limit to how many you can have equipped at once. There's also a limit to the number of characters you can have, though you can increase that by building houses, and all of the characters perform different tasks. The workers build and collect, clerics can heal and unlock useful magic, soldiers battle enemies. There are also other characters you'll encounter in the world who can help in different ways, assuming you help them first. The combat is especially refreshing. There are abilities you can equip, like freezing attacks, but they activate at random, and you have to click on them when they appear to use them, adding an incentive to be an active participant in the fights instead of letting them play out in the background. Best of all, everything is in real time, so there's a frenetic pacing to the gameplay I found really satisfying, and it wasn't impeded by clunky controls. Every action is one click, leaving you free to click around the map on as many tasks as you need, knowing they'll all eventually get done. The demo only featured a few chapters, and I held off completing the last one so I could keep playing. I think I sunk 2 hours into it, and I don't really have anything negative to say about it. I had no technical issues, and all of the mechanics made sense as they were introduced. The animation is quirky with wonderful cutscenes. I like the story, the music, even the icons representing each resource, and the way the resources pop into the world. There was one tiny thing I'd tweak though. Chapters ended with a message that I won the game and an option to go back to the lobby. The developer did such a good job with the cutscenes moving the story along in a seamless way that ending a chapter like that felt too gamey. Write some kind of story-based line that rounds up the chapter instead. Now obviously none of that is a game-breaking issue, but there aren't any to speak of. A lot of management games bog you down with dumb controls, messy menus, and frankly, some of them are about as fun as managing the food in your fridge. The Unexpected Quest, which I'll just call Quest, isn't one of those games. It's fluid with constant engagement that for me never got old. I think you'll fall in love with it like I did, especially after the tutorial. Now the full game isn't out yet, but you can download the demo right now on GameJolt.
Number 5.
Gears of Eden is an open-world exploration game set in a distant future where you play as a sentient rover in space searching for meaning behind your existence. I played an early alpha meant to showcase some of its core mechanics, kind of like a tech demo. Given that, take everything I'm going to say about those mechanics and how they may fit into the broader scope of the game with a grain of Himalayan salt. Now the alpha kicks off with you waking up on an abandoned mining colony on an asteroid, and the tutorial walks you through how to gather resources and manage your rover. From there, you're free to explore, finding key areas along the way. And since the alpha is so far removed from the developer's description of the game as a story-driven adventure, I have no way to gauge from the alpha what the full game will be. So this entry is more of a speculative pros and cons list, and hopefully we'll get to see more when they make a proper demo. The pros are obvious. The game is beautiful, as is the rover's design, and the concept is a unique one. Not being a sentient rover because Wall-E, but being a rover protagonist in an adventure game that applies a bit of realism to it. You have parts you need to maintain because they degrade over time with use, solar panels replenish energy more slowly, drills are less effective, etc., and you can craft items to repair or improve them. I initially found all of that satisfying to manage, but my interest was slowly derailed by a train of balancing issues. I'll start with the controls. This is the kind of game I'd rather play with a gamepad, so hopefully it'll have full controller support. But I played with a keyboard, and exploration was a pain on my fingers because the rover was painfully slow, which meant really long stretches holding down the WASD keys. Considering how often you'll be moving in one direction for an extended period, an autopilot you can toggle on and off to give your fingies a rest would be a huge quality of life improvement. There was a floaty momentum to the movement too that made stopping on a dime difficult, and I'd rather that be tightened up, because you have to be directly above a resource to mine it, and some resources are so close together that the slightest movement shifts you to a different one. The rover's base speed could also be increased to make exploration less of a chore in the beginning. It's so slow without power that I'd let the game run in the background until solar energy was available to recharge it. You could argue that's an incentive to plan ahead where energy is concerned, but the speed isn't much better when you do have power. You can also craft energy cells to replenish the rover on the fly, though drilling for the resources to craft them took so much input for the output that it didn't seem worth it when I could just wait for the sun. That said, solar charging felt delayed. The lighting in the game is fantastic, so it seemed obvious when I was in direct sunlight, yet it didn't line up with when the panels would actually start charging. I still preferred it to using cells though. After all, sunshine is free, and the only inventory space it takes up is in your heart. As for crafting, the material cost to maintain the rover's parts seemed fine, but the durability of some parts depleted quickly. It always felt like I barely did anything before having to repair something again. Power depleted quickly as well. All of the mechanics are woven together in an intuitive way that makes for an enjoyable management loop, easily collapsed if the balance isn't right, and to me, the baseline stats are a tad out of whack. Others may completely disagree, especially since the developer already made a lot of adjustments. And again, you can upgrade your components to improve speed, efficiency, durability, and the like to combat most of those issues, but upgrading should be about evolving the gameplay, not a way to make the game more playable. Now there isn't much more to mention for what the alpha is. The HUD is clean and unintrusive, but you can toggle it off. Right-clicking to lift and drag items from one storage to another is unwieldy, so double-clicking an item to automatically move it between available storage, or clicking on it and having a transfer option underneath would both be better design choices. I'd also like the UI to be more cohesive. For example, repair kits show how many units of durability they repair, but components don't show how many units of durability need repairing. One thing I'm thrilled about is that there's a way to reset the rover if you get stuck in the geometry, because I got hooked on a beam at the research station and it would have been game over if I couldn't get out of it. Which brings me to the one major problem I have with the game: navigation. Specifically, I'd be moving along fine, then start backsliding as if I was on a huge incline, even when it looked like flat terrain, or when I just made it over an incline much steeper without any problem, and it didn't seem to matter if I had power or not, or what condition my components were in. Sometimes scooching back and forth allowed me to press on, but I'd usually have to go back to find another route. It happened so often that it soured my desire to explore, because I was afraid I'd yet again get stuck somewhere it took ages to get out of, even with the aid of resetting the rover to a previous location, which should be a last resort anyway, not a crutch. And ultimately, I really enjoyed the alpha, but I'm not sure if Gears of Eden knows what it wants to be. A resource management game is fundamentally different from a story-driven adventure RPG. If the developer is touting this as the latter, then the resource management aspect and the way it impacts exploration should both be balanced to support that, not hinder it or turn it into a slog. And right now, that's kind of what it seems like it would do. Now, I love where the game might end up as an adventure with more narrative elements, new locations and NPCs to interact with, missions, combat, trading, and the list goes on. But that's a tall order that doesn't quite jive with what's on the alpha's menu, so I'm very curious to see how things progress. In short, the alpha is a slow burn, but it burns well, and there's something zen and lovely about the deliberateness of it all. If the full game includes even half of what the developer projects, and it actually works well together, it'll certainly be a refreshing indie title. So I say give the Gears of Eden alpha a try, if only because you love space. And you can download it right now on Steam. Now here's a quick look at some bonus games, and remember that some of the games I mentioned are still works in progress, so what I'm showing you may not reflect the final release.
Bonus games.
That's it for this episode of Toast Bites. If you like these games or hated them, let me know in the comments, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. The race to 1,000 is here, which means reaching 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and it's a long way to go from 300, so you subbing, liking, and sharing really helps out. And I'll be back soon with a peek at even more great indie games to enjoy. Until then, see you on the plate!